every time I sit with somebody who's dying, I actually learn about my death.
Meet Mary Telliano, the Death Doula. She works with clients at the end of their lives to help them grieve and die gracefully. We talk about what people really care about at the end of their lives, how our culture denies death, and the use of psychedelics to both live and die better. All right, welcome, Mary.
Hi.
So happy that you're here.
Thank you.
I've been wanting to learn about Death Doula for a while. So can you start out by just giving me and people who are listening or watching an overview of what it is that you do in that capacity?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, we are souls who are seeing other souls in the end of life process and helping people complete that and have the highest intention for the best death possible for the person in front of us. So our aim is to give people resources, to be an assistant to the family, to guide them through the energetic process of dying. We have a great medical system that's set up for hospice to support and manage pain, but there's a heavy emphasis on the spiritual aspect and the energetic, and that's where we come in, and we can lend a little bit more of a hand and an openness. And sometimes a death doula is there and she's the act, or he or she is the act of presence, and sometimes they're helping with estate planning and contracts and all of those things. So there's a variety of doulas. And I truly believe every human's a doula, actually. If you're alive, you're a death doula. You know how to do it. This isn't something that you just slip into. This is something that everybody is.
So there's, 100 things that came up for me there. So concretely, it sounds like this isn't like you don't just show up on a particular day. There's somebody reaches out to you or learns about what you do, and then we don't know necessarily when anybody is going to pass. Yeah. So what does that process look like? Like you might be with a particular person for an extended period of time, coming in from time to time. Are you there 8 hours a day?
That varies too. So sometimes I'm with a client. My longest client I've had is 8 months, and we were working together in treatment before hospice. I've worked with somebody a day before they die, and then I work sometimes with the family, and I've never even met the person in physical form who passed away. I'm helping them process grief years later, months later. So there's a variety of like when I drop into people's lives. So it's very vast.
How do these people find you? Because I would not even know to look for this kind of support.
Yeah, you have to create awareness, having conversations on podcast. I have a podcast. I create community events, grief healing ceremonies. And I just make myself available all over my social media to kind of just be a part of that conversation. And I think if you have that conversation enough, that beacon gets wider and wider. And the way that clients come through is really magical and synchronistic. And so I just create the part where I'm saying yes and showing up, and I serve the people who I'm supposed to serve. I do a lot of work in hospice as well, volunteer work. So that also creates another pocket for me to be seen in.
Got it. So when I don't have a lot of, I think the way that our society is set up and our culture, I've never witnessed someone pass. The closest thing would be, an animal who was at the end of their life getting put down in a vet. But, when I think of my experiences firsthand with death, they're incredibly limited.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, how did you get into this? Did you have a different sort of upbringing than I did, where this was more present in your life?
Yeah. People ask me all the time, like, where did this start for you? And I can say my initiation in death was my near-death experience at 4. At 4 years old, I drowned. And I had an experience, and I can say that life did change after there. Even though I was very young, those memories are very close about what happened that day, all the different things that led up to there. And so I would say that's my initiation into death. And from that point, I never really had a disassociation from it. I had a very natural curiosity about the end of life process. I used to go down the street and when I was 8 to this gentleman's house where he was older and he was dying, and I would just go there after school and want to be around him.
Wow.
I don't know why. I was just attracted naturally to this process. I think I found more life at the end of life than what other people were necessarily feeling. And then I started volunteering at 12 in elderly homes for the same curiosity. And then as I became older and harnessed my skills, became a plant medicine facilitator, and naturally these two worlds began to merge. My work with end of life and with plant medicine.
Wow.
So it's a calling that is hard to ignore. And
This is like a real vocation. I mean, given your history, that's incredible.
Yeah. Every doula, I truly believe, and when I say every human's a doula, we are, but everybody who signs up for this work has the same cell, whatever that cell is in me, we share that in common, that desire to share ourselves at the end of life.
Did you ever have a more traditional job, or for you, was that just not even in the cards?
Yeah, yeah. For 16 years, I was a finance and insurance manager at a motorcycle dealership. And I enjoyed it. But the more that I stepped into the plant medicine world, the more the work of a doula came to a very, this is your work. There was no more denying it and running from it. So when I discovered what an end-of-life doula was, I gave my 3 months notice. And I was like, I'm doing this. Wow. I'm all in.
So at 12, you were volunteering at this. And then you sort of, like a lot of people, I think, you had to make some money and establish yourself.
I didn't see that curiosity as something that was going to be a career. I just was in it. I was just there and participating with it. And then that door just kind of closed. It was a program through my family's church. It was called the Agape Club. So it was an after school program. So once I graduated school, you know what I mean? Like, you just don't go back to those programs, and that was it. Yeah.
So I wanted to, there's 100 things, but I don't want to forget, when you were 4, what was that experience? You don't need to necessarily recount the specifics of that day, but what was so impactful? What do you remember and recall?
I even have recollections of it even when I was driving here today. It's a profound part of my life, even though it was so young. So in Hawaii, it's where I was born and raised, there's a place called Waipio Valley, and it's a river and it goes out into the ocean. My father was somewhere on the beach hanging out. My brothers were at the shore, and I decided to walk up the river by myself. And so I walked up the river, and if you know anything about this valley, you're locals only. Like, you can't just come onto this beach and be there. So I knew everybody there. And there was nobody. And I remember looking at the water, and I was really determined at that age to swim, but I couldn't swim yet. And I remember looking at the water and being like, I got this. You could do it, Mary. Wow. And I jumped in, and the river started to carry me away, and I couldn't get to the top of the water. So what I remember is brown water and churning and sinking, bubbles going above my head, and then darkness. That was it. That was like the timeline. And so I was in just nothing. It was a void. I've been there now as an adult on plant medicine. It's very interesting to make that connection back. And when I came back into my body, so I didn't go to like a light with, how other people talk about it. It was just nothing. And when I came back and I was on the ground and I was coughing, there was this person standing above me, and it was the tallest being I've ever seen, and I couldn't see the face, and it went on for miles. And I knew in the presence of this, I was okay. Whatever this being was, I didn't feel scared anymore. I was okay. And then before I could even like connect with this being, I hear my mom screaming down the beach. She left work that moment and came to the beach because she felt something was wrong with me.
Wow.
So my mom's screaming down the beach. She's running towards me. I'm now out of this trance and running towards my mom to tell her everything. She goes and finds my dad and yells at him. It becomes a thing. And then we finally get back to like, well, who was it that got you out of the water? And I tried to explain to my mom what I could at the time, and we couldn't find anybody on the beach that was what I was trying to describe.
Wow. So you went from river to washed up on a beach, and you were unable to figure out if there was a human that
I don't feel it was a human presence.
Wow.
My dad is 6'2". So I know at that age, I had the perception of what a tall man would be. This being went on into the sky, and the sun was right behind it. And you got salt water in your eye, things are blurry, and I just couldn't focus long enough to be like, what are you thinking? Like, it just happened so fast. And then my mom was running down the beach, and then it was over.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did that I mean, obviously. Have you been afraid of your own death since then in a way that I know that most people sort of implicitly are? Do you have a different experience when you listen to what people say their fears are?
It's changed over time. I think I've gone through the natural evolution of fearing death. I think we're supposed to go through that initiation of finally realizing, okay, there's something happening over there, and whatever it is, I'm excited to get there. There's the whole process of unfolding. Yeah, I feel like, so many people I love are up the river. They're just a few miles up the trail as me, and we're going to meet up at the same place. And so over time, that's evolved, and then I've become a mom, and you have the natural fears of leaving too soon and making sure that, you live a full life so you can witness the lives you've created. So there's like natural fears, but I don't, I guess fear is okay to kind of follow, and bounce around my body. I'm just kind of surrendered when it's my turn. When it's my turn, I think I've developed enough practices of letting go that I think there'll be more ease in it.
Yeah. That's a shaman that I worked with said that this is, we're learning to die. It was one of the things that she said when I think this was prior to doing ayahuasca, probably in one.
That's all
scenario.
We're here to do is learn how to die. But there's so much joyfulness and bitterness and clarity mixed with unclarity. The journey is what it's about. And then that's through the journey we learn how to die. So it's powerful. The Egyptians revered it as the biggest honor of your life was to die.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. So moving now to your work, what sort of things you mentioned the Egyptians just here, like how do you do it? What is the doing? You mentioned estate planning that I can see and visualize and concretely understand.
Yeah.
Emotionally supporting people, that I can visualize. It sounds like to you there's an energetic shepherding that is occurring, and I'm curious.
I love how you said that.
Yeah.
Energetic shepherd. Yes, there is that. One of my clients kind of showed me what that piece was. I had been volunteering for, at that point, like a year and a half, and I'd been working with this particular client for 6 months, and we had a very powerful connection. And as he was passing, he was holding my hand, and I immediately went into this place where he was, and he was saying, like, the whole point of you being here is you're just supposed to be a battery. You're a battery. That's the point. That is what your work is. And so it's like this extra person that can plug in and see where they're at just to infuse a little bit more energy into what is taking place. And the way that we do that is through presence, through asking open-ended questions, through seeing where people might be stuck in their lives of letting go. So helping them compassionately close. Helping the family recognize things that sometimes hospice doesn't tell them. When people stop eating food, it becomes very personal for a family. And helping them understand, like, the body doesn't need food, where it's going. And just having that one shift creates so much ease in the energy because now they've let that go.
Yeah.
And now the person has permission to refuse food. And everybody's kind of walking in the same place. But I find that the energetics can sometimes be so muddled in a lot of different layers of family dynamics that we can kind of come in and serve as a reflection and possibly an opportunity to educate. So there is a shepherding, but it really matches who you're serving. I don't know what somebody needs until I'm physically in front of them and I can see it and feel it, and it starts coming to me.
Yeah.
I've stopped trying to even when I first became a doula, I would plan, write down, this is what these are the topics that I'd be reviewing and be like, okay, I did my
Here's
intake
our
with
activities.
this family. This is kind of what I'm feeling, and all that goes out the window.
Yeah.
And I just sit now and really just allow myself to be a listener to what is their real need here and what are they really saying. So.
Wow. So I imagine with the food that when I hear that part of me that is, I think probably on par for a lot of the culture is it feels like, oh, you're quitting, you're giving up, and even the other thing that has sort of occurred to me is that I've heard stories of when they have that final conversation, and then they let go. And there's like at the end, it seems like what keeps people going is a will that, not in a bad way, can be let go of when that final thing has come to completion. Is that match your experience of being there?
What do you mean, like final thing, like people will hold out for cousin Eddie to get there? Yes,
or yes. Conversation.
I truly believe people decide when they're going to go.
Really?
When it's that kind of scenario
yes.
like diagnosis, and we've come this far, and we're hanging on to like little frails of life, as opposed to like an accidental or sudden death. Yes, I do see the permission to let go solely sitting in that person's hands.
Wow. What, when you interact, let's go to the person who is dying first. I'm sure that the people have a range of different experiences, from fear to acceptance when you show up there. What have you learned from your interactions with them about, I don't know, regrets that they've had, or ways to live one's life, or things that they wish they'd done differently?
Yeah, every time I sit with somebody who's dying, I actually learn about my death. I'm actually learning about myself. So it's interesting because people are like, well, what are you really learning? And it's like, I'm actually learning so much about me in the end of my life. But as far as regrets and unfinished business, people tend to place a lot of emphasis on, my energy shouldn't have been so tied up in resentment. My energy should have been more spent on the things that matter. You never see a U-Haul behind a hearse, so the things that really matter come to life. And I think that that's the portal of magic. Radical honesty, complete vulnerability, both of those doors, you can't shut them at the end. As much as like you can see people trying to like hold that door, closed, it's going to crack open. Life will crack open. And so it's a lot of regret about where people decided to spend energy and where they didn't. And through witnessing that time and time again, I'm friends with death every single day. And so it changes the way that I interact with my family and my friends and my business. So it changes you, and I think it's really unfortunate that you haven't sat with somebody and you haven't been close to a dead body. There's so much to inherit in that space. Yeah.
What is missed? Because I don't think I'm unique in that, my own personal aversion to it, plus a cultural aversion to it.
Well, it's all cultural.
Yeah.
120 years ago, we had the Civil War, and that's where death changed in America.
Okay. Tell me about this. I'm curious about the history.
Yeah. So 120 years ago, before the Civil War, grandma died in the house. You watched the whole process. You helped her labor her death. They buried that grandma in the backyard, and that was and then your sister was born. So you watched, it was all happening in that one house. And so during the Civil War, the North and the South, there were train conductors, and they were not wanting to put any bodies in transit anymore because of the smell. They were like, we're not. And so families were like, I want my dead husband, please. And the train conductors were in refusal because it was just not very pleasant.
Yeah.
And so Abraham Lincoln hired doctors to start embalming bodies. And that's when funeral homes, undertakers, mortuaries, now death became a business. And after the Civil War, they were like, well, this is my cash grab. Like, I don't want this to end. And so they would actually embalm bodies and put them in windows. Abraham Lincoln was the first president to be embalmed and brought around the whole country and shown off. And so we were a country in grief, and we willingly handed that over to a business. And then we just forgot. And then it became something like, just very automatic. And now we're here 120 years later in a different cycle. And we're like, but wait, there's something missing. There's something missing in my initiation into adulthood. And that is being with death.
Do you think it's the embalming process, or that there's a corporate
It's the
side
corporation.
Of it?
It's the corporation.
Got it.
So like what I see now in modern day, how the corporation has gone into, I would say, not being helpful and more of a poison is, when I see people who are going from treatment into hospice, all of a sudden their numbers put into some kind of database, and you have hospices all over the county trying to sell them and reaching them in a very vulnerable position to like go with our hospice, go here. You know, there are now people that are being sold on stuff. And there's very little emphasis on, are you okay? How are you? Our mortuary offers group healing sessions every month. And, you know, when you come with our program, you know, we support you emotionally. You know, like there's that piece that's missing from the system.
One of the things that I've heard, which I think is true, is that, we have our hospitals, which do amazing things, but there's that there are places where life is brought into the world and places where life exits the world, and they lack the temple aspect where that might have happened it happened everywhere in the past, but they're like that sort of sacred ritual can be clipboarded and reduced into, just check here. Okay, we're going to get them in this urn, this thing. What would be a better way of doing that?
Well, I think
should the family be more involved?
Yeah, I think wherever somebody dies, it's perfect. Whether that's in a hospital or they're in the backyard in Hawaii, stargazing, like the best, most beautiful scenario in the world. Wherever it's happening, it's sacred because we're the temple, we're the batteries, we're the extra energy in the room that can really make a difference by our own nervous system and regulating and helping that other person regulate through us. So, I guess my best advice for a family going through the process and wanting to bring in more sacredness would just ask that question, what could bring in more sacredness? And then close your eyes and listen. And it's going to be different for each person. For Cousin Eddie, it could be like, oh, go and get his pictures of his boats and bring it in the room.
Play a song.
For Auntie Rebecca, it might be, let's bake her favorite pies, even though she can't eat. Let's get that smell in the room. Right? Like let's get that going for her so she can be in that moment. If it's for Aunt Julie, it might be, let's go get boxes of sand from the beach so she can put her hands in the sand one last time. So there's going to be something different that's sacred for each person, but you just have to ask and listen and then do it.
It's even just thinking of how simple the things that you mentioned are. It's moving to think of what you would want at the end. Sand or the smell of a pie or that's deeply.
And that's what we do. We help people create vigils. We help them create legacy projects. So, whatever that legacy projects have its own voice. So you just ask what that is and it'll show up and you'll start to work with families with that. But vigil.
Does that mean something that like persists after that?
Yeah.
Can you tell me, like, what does legacy project mean?
Oh my gosh. Legacy projects are just as across the board as the things I just mentioned with the sand and the pie. It could be a video. It could be future letters that you write to your grandkids. And, if you're dying and, in 3 years they're graduating college, writing that letter in the future or for the wedding or the future moments. It could be a certain day every year where the family comes together to wear funny hats because that's what you liked. You know what I mean? It could be whatever the legacy is. It's something that continues to bring in your essence long after you're gone.
Got it.
It's tied into your dharma, really.
And well, even the suggestion to do that, I see as something that a death doula would bring because you're going through grief. You're like probably not even eating. And the idea to necessarily write letters or create a video is just so far out
It's so far out. And so you're going to touch on people. So I never bring it up. It's on my website of things that are available for the client to see before they hire me of what my scope of practice is. But a legacy project is something, like I said, it has its own voice and it comes in when it comes in. How it comes in. I've had the legacy projects bring out family drama that they were trying to squash, but it needed to come up so that they could close out this part of that relationship or that rough part that was more fortified than soft. And so the legacy project can be super triggering. With my school, with my students, I teach them like not everyone's going to want to do a legacy project, but just be listening and looking and just making notice of like who that person is. And even if nothing's made, like take in that person's legacy while you're serving them. Know who you're serving. So it might just be an internal process that you see. And then years later, the family comes to you and they're like, we want to create that video, So it's its own tide, a legacy project.
Wow. You mentioned things that you're learning about your death. I don't know if you're able to put any of that into words, but if you are.
you witness people holding on to things that you didn't know would be so. I'll give you an example of one person that I learned about my death. I like things. I like to play in this dimension with items and stuff and clothes. And, like I have a value system here that I enjoy. And it was really interesting because the man I was serving was a very wealthy man. And he would not die because he did not want his kids to have his money.
Wow.
The skin was falling off of him. He did not want any of his children to inherit anything that he had created. This is one of the most craziest thing. And after I witnessed that death, I was like, does anybody need any money? I've always been very generous and giving and loving with exchange, but like I opened up even more because it's just like, wow, okay, like I really don't want that to be my story at the end. And I could see how a lifetime of feeding that monster could dilute that over time. So you get to kind of see the resistance, and then you get to see beautiful surrender and being like, I would do it that way. I would do my death that way. And when I say that way, just being open to allowing the family to be in the room, being open to sharing their process. I believe that when somebody's dying, they're feeding the family, and that food is their death. And how they feed them and how they eat will be determined on how they grieve. And so I see now in witnessing people surrender, I'm like, I'm going to feed my family so well with the way that I leave here. And so I'm inheriting all those things, the do's and the don'ts, when I'm here and in those spaces.
And it sounds like, without, of course, there's a bit of value judgment on this, but done well, that the process of grief may take a different shape than if your father isn't dying because he doesn't want to give you the money. Like
right.
the things that you'll have to unpack.
Right? Yeah. Like now dad's dead and now like there's this weird thing with the money and I don't even know how, like, what do I do?
What do I do with
There's too many things. There's too many things that you're putting up. So yeah, I donate my body to my family's grief. And what that looks like is including them in all of it and telling them and sharing about like what the process feels like. I'm going somewhere eventually before some people in my family. And if I can give them a little bit of something of their death through mine, then I'm going to. And I truly believe that's how we reinvest in the future we can't see, is by sharing our death.
You mentioned somewhere, up the river, down the river. How did your beliefs about this evolve over the course of your life? I don't know if you started with a belief. It just got
stronger. So, I was raised in the context of a very strong, strict Christian home. And so there's a belief in life after death, but there's also like this karmic system that I didn't buy into. Like at the age of 9, I was like, I was born a sinner.
Yeah.
No. So you
didn't go for original sin right off the jump.
I didn't jump on that bandwagon. I actually remember waking up from that Maya, that illusion at 9 and being like, no, this doesn't feel right. So, but I had already at that age experienced so much of the invisible world that you can feel, but you can't see. And just so much in my life had happened up until that point where I knew at a very young age that there's a place somewhere outside of this that is where I'm going to go to, and it's not bad. It doesn't feel scary. It doesn't feel condemning. And so throughout my life, that's solidified, and I've got more validation, more synchronistic things that come through that really speak to, like, when you're self-questioning, like, is this really real? And something pops up and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is really, there is really something that happens on the other side. I think my relationship with my understanding of it, if you were to reduce it down now, is that side needs us as much as we need them. There's a collaboration that's always available to us if we can kind of get ourselves into that space to be able to receive it.
Do you have an idea of what that side needs from us and what we need from them at all? Okay.
Belief. That just makes it more tangible for us to be here on earth is when we have to have a myth, right? Like, so there's like, we can have the myth of Christianity, we can have the myth of Buddhism, we can have the myth of Krishna. Doesn't matter which one's right at the end. It's just what those myths are giving us is a value system of how to live our best and most ascended life here. Mm-hmm. So I quit trying to name what happens at the end, but I definitely feel there's an evolution of the soul. And it feels like a celebration. And that side really wants us to celebrate why we're here still. I think that side tries to make itself more visible to us as time goes on, so that like we don't get stuck in like the guilt or the shame or the same mistakes that maybe how they lived their lives before they left. I know that there's a lot of cheerleaders on that side.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I call it the Great Garden.
And why is it the Great Garden?
I don't know. That's
You just like that?
One of my clients came to me after she passed, and she was calling it the Great Garden. Actually, this is her. This is part of her body. This is her cremation.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Do you have keepsakes from
I do. I get a lot. I mean, I get a lot of gifts from people on the other side after they go. And the family sometimes, be like, oh, I know you guys really, there's a strong bond that's connected, So sometimes I inherit really lovely heirlooms. And in this case, it was this woman that came to me, and she was showing me this garden where it was the water you couldn't see, you could see forever in it. It was like this beautiful pond where it was just crystal.
You say
clear.
She was showing you. What do you mean by that?
It's usually typically. I mean, I can get images all day.
So you're sitting with her and you're starting to get these images, or
she had already passed.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. She had already passed, and I was, probably I don't even know exactly where, but typically I get like most of my profound messages right before sleep or when I'm in the shower, when I'm just kind of in like. Not even trying to think of it, just like passing into like one phase of awareness into the next. And she came through and she was just showing me this beautiful garden. I was like, this is amazing. It's like just images.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, so I ask my audience is probably mirrors me in that I was I'm 35 now, probably up until 30-ish years old. I was hardcore materialist, I would say. Mm-hmm. Got my family successfully to stop going to church through enough arguing and complaining, and
did it.
Made my aunt cry, and I was just like, little like ruiner of all things religious,
little Satan.
Exactly. My numbers, 666 are the first three numbers of my number, so I was not a terror, but I was I did not go for it. And I felt a strong disconnection from religion, and it's only recently that I have experienced an openness to, what do I say? My dog dying was the first time that I was like, I feel a presence that is her, there's a knowing which I cannot justify, prove, explain, or point to. And so I say that because I'm curious how you talk to people like sort of me in this in-between, not certain stage, and people who maybe were like more how I was. Like, what is there any way to speak to someone like that and open them up? Or for me, it was like, I did a bunch of plant medicine.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's an important process, and it's a very vulnerable one.
Yeah.
And it's one that doesn't come with a guidebook. It's an embodiment piece. Mm-hmm. There, so what you were saying is like this knowing, but there are no words for it, but there's this understanding that there's something more. Mm-hmm. That's the gift that pets give us, when they cross over, is they're also helpers for us to realize that life isn't over at death. But I would just nourish the embodiment practice. It's like whatever's coming up for you, it might be an image. It might be a smell of your dog. It might be a dog that's very similar that walks by you and does kind of the same mannerisms as your dog. And you go, that, what's that? All of those things are playing a role. But yeah, there's nothing to really say or to stretch there. I just tell people, be with that magic. Keep your heart open. Actually, I think that would be the only thing I would say. So no matter what you're experiencing in grief or that in-between purgatory state, keep your heart open. Don't close that part down. A lot of people will do that, will close off, and it just restricts the flow of all the magic that can be shown to you.
Yeah. I think that was part of it for me was, I mean, the emotions that came up were just so intense, you know, obviously grief, but rage. I was livid, not for a long period of time, but I had to feel the spike of that rage at the universe and God and everything, you know? And I was like, oh, this has been here the whole time.
Well, I was going to say that piece would be something, if you were a client, I would go, okay, well, where was the first time that you experienced that kind of rage? Because it sounds like your dog gave you an extra invitation to really go there and discover what's hidden, what is in that rage box.
Yes, that there was I was like a trigger for that.
Exactly.
Yes.
Animals do that.
Yes.
Humans do it too, but I find that animals are like, they're holding all the keys to like our unprocessed trauma. When they die, we're like, fuck you. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cuss.
You're fine. You're allowed to swear.
Screw you, Aunt Betty. They're like, why am I mad at my aunt right now? And it's like, you abandoned me. But it's all tied in. And so that's where I would say I would encourage my client to start exploring, because your dog passing wasn't for no reason. And those feelings coming up are not by accident.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I for me, it was, I didn't know this, and it's funny in retrospect, but you know, still has some rawness to it. I felt unloved by God. I was like, why would you do this to me? Why would you give me this and then take this from me? And that question and that realization and sort of while there are good reasons that I think I push back on the organized religion and all of that stuff, that there was an emotional bedrock that sort of informed why I did that, which was this anger or frustration or rage for feeling unloved by creation or whatever. Feeling into that and feeling the misunderstanding of that point of view was, you know, opened something up, I think, in me. And I don't claim to be deeply intuitive, spiritually connected at this point, but I feel an opening.
That
can't be
true.
Well, in comparison with some of the people that I know that feel the ease that I see you engage with this and the utter assuredness that you have in the experiences that you have had, I find myself on both sides going, you're just making this up. You know, these are just thoughts and feelings to coping mechanisms to deal with grief and pain. And then the other part of me goes, you are shutting down the gift of this. And if you can stop the fear that makes those doubts come up, there's just so much more. So I find myself tug of warring at this particular point in my life.
Just make them be friends.
Yeah.
The need to have the logic and the need to feel into the magic both need to have a conversation. That's it. Be like, just talk to the fear. Be like, why are you so scared that this might be a possibility? And the logic, be like, thank you for keeping me grounded.
Yeah. Well, I think you said it, is I've seen some, what to me feel like people who are in and around this beliefs, not exactly your belief system, but space that I go, they're out, they're space cadets. they're totally in the ether, and maybe they have a deeper knowing than even I am capable of, but I want to operate here.
No, yes.
On planet Earth.
Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment,
chop wood, carry water.
Yeah, you got to still do the human thing. You know, I go and I serve plant medicine, and I go and I serve a family who needs support for the dying, and then I'll have a couple calls with my students and do coaching stuff, and then I go home and I eat ice cream and watch 90 Day Fiance.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't ever want to pretend, or, you know, that aloofness sometimes I feel like is, I can see, I was just like, stop being so dramatic. Just come back to us. Like, it's okay to be human. That's what we're here to do. And so, yeah, I know what the ungroundedness you're talking about. So the logic keeps me grounded.
Yeah.
The logic keeps me in check. I don't want to make the logic go out the window, but my logic and my magic are now like in cahoots with like, how do we make every day a miracle for Mary? How do we keep her invested and committed and grounded and uniformed? And how do we also show her all the miraculous things that are around her at all times? Like, and so that's where I operate with both of them.
And does that, I mean, what is your daily experience? Do you feel like you experience that level of connectedness most every day?
Yeah, because it's nothing to do. I don't have to like invoke a meditation. I don't have to go do plant medicine. I really have enough evidence in myself that like I am the medicine. It's happening right now. And this moment is a miracle. The fact that I woke up today is a miracle. And it's this feeling of just being satisfied.
Wow.
Satisfied.
Interesting. I feel that some of the end points that everybody knows you want to get to, it's like, it's a miracle. And, you know, waking up was great, can become, and I've done this, they can become mantras that you like just repeat to try to make it true in the face of not sincerely feeling it embodied inside of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a difference when it's like effortless knowing versus I'm going to write it down 800 times in my gratitude journal and affirm it until it becomes real, which has a certain degree of value at some point in the journey.
I want it all.
Yeah.
I want the feeling of being scared. I want the feeling of being really stoked. Me having a moment where I almost crashed my car on the 405 and I barely don't, like, you know, I could see that as like what are you doing, Mary? Or I could be like, that was exhilarating.
Yeah.
I am so protected, you know, so it's just really how I'm relating to each moment. I can, you know, sacred rage is important. Feeling disconnected from myself is a part of a shedding away process that we all feel. People get really connected to wanting to be connected, and that's not the whole point. We are constantly contracting and expanding, and that don't force the mantra. You know, people say fake it till you make it. I think that can become poison too.
Yeah.
Be with what is arriving at any moment. I keep my faucet on. I can be really pissed off in a moment and express it in the most somatic way, and I feel great about the next moment, wherever that takes me. So, the mantra work, I've get into that.
It's got a certain place.
It's got its place. Yeah. It's got a place.
And everything, and this is what I've seen, which is, of course, thank you, life, for making everything so paradoxical and tricky. But every strength that I have had in my life contains the seeds of a weakness and a limitation for the next thing right? So I'm pretty analytical and pretty, like, that has been the barrier to the next thing. It was the key to success in one stage, and now it is the limit, the ceiling on the next thing. So it's not that mantras are bad; they're wonderful until they're
no longer
the ceiling on the next thing.
Right. And I also feel like what mantra is pointing us to is just linguistics. Like everything I say is a mantra because it's reaffirming my external experience, which is reaffirming my internal experience. So I'm really careful, mindful might be the right word, of what I say and how I say it and what I mean behind what I say. So that's what mantras has pointed me to, is like the next part is just like the linguistic part.
So I want to talk about plant medicine too.
Yes.
What is your background, I guess, doing/facilitating?
I facilitate 5-MeO-DMT. I also facilitate MDMA and Psilocybin. So those are the three medicines that I work with. Some of my clients come for just one of those medicines in a sitting. Sometimes it's a couple of those mixed in for a journey. So it really just depends. But those are the ones that I work with. And I work with people who are at the end of life with this medicine. And we gauge which medicine. There's a lot that goes into serving somebody who's at the end of life. But and then people who are dealing with energetic death. And physically healthy, so I have a wide range of people I serve.
Yeah, I should say I've not sat with you before, but a lot of people, like I've talked about having sat, and they always ask, I don't know, is it okay if people search you and find you on the internet and reach out to you regarding this sort of a thing?
Yeah, through like this kind of podcast format, I probably won't respond.
Okay.
For plant medicine work, there's a very specific way that I intake clients. So most likely if you hear me on here,
you're probably not going to see me in real life.
I'm not going to answer your text or an email, and everything I do is within regards to safety and the law. So yeah.
Got it. All right. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I just get a lot of questions, and we're at a stage with the legality in the United States of America where unfortunately I can't be like, here's a trusted person that I can refer you to and they can see if you're a good fit. And it's, it just is a bummer. And not to put any of that you need to solve this problem.
Yeah, it's a fine line that we have to walk as facilitators, as holders of these sacred medicines. And, we're in a very exciting time now where, back in the 70s and the 60s and the revolution of the renaissance of psychedelics back then versus now is we have integration. And we have a lot more science. And so it's beautiful because, the ball is already rolling towards legalization, which is exciting. I'm very interested to see how all of the legalities eventually iron out. But my projection, if I pull myself out of my body and I look at psychedelics as like a timeline, I truly believe that the medicine will work its way through our collective consciousness in such a big way that we will eventually remember that we are the medicine. And that's already happening in us. When I facilitate any medicine, it's not like I stand outside of people with mandalas and fractals and I make them feel something. That's all happening already inside of them. That's an internal process. So there's hopefully going to be a point where, we'll just remember that and we'll get to a state of more clarity with that. But the medicine's already showing us what we are. So.
And I've seen people, and there's an easy tendency to go, oh, this thing helped me. This, and of course these experiences are intense. And it seems like a good practitioner or facilitator is always trying to remind you of like, this occurred inside of you. Yes, it was occasioned. Yes, there might have been some assistance and some opening and some support, but this was not happening for everyone else in the world, in the room, in the way that it was happening for you.
It's your fingerprint.
Yeah.
It's your inner fingerprint. It's your inner concert. It's only the things that you could understand, and it's different. You can give somebody the same dose next to the same person, and they'll have two very completely different experiences with the medicine. And it's important. There's a lot of facilitators that are holding these medicines with integrity and reminding people, empowering them back to themselves. And then there's also the facilitators that stand over people with rattles. They're like, it's me, I'm doing it. And I find that to be funny. I find it to be just comical. We're all getting medicine from the right people that we're supposed to at different times. But, to find a facilitator, I would say, ask a lot of questions, make sure that people have personally sat with this person, and make sure that there's an intake process, a medical intake process, as well as an energetic and spiritual, mental intake, and make sure that facilitator is all about integration. If you can find one that is heavy on those aspects, then I think you're aiming in the right direction.
Yeah. In terms of the medicines that you work with, I know that a lot of it is certainly intuitive, but do you see different roles that each of them might play that are subtly different? Yeah. So can you break down sort of how you think about that?
I find that psilocybin is like a teacher, and the teacher that it can be like ayahuasca, very grandmother, like stern, or it can kind of sometimes go into like more of a masculine role. But I find that the psilocybin is teaching us something about the network of our energy. And then the MDMA, I find, is all about opening up that heart space. And I've seen a lot of different psychic activations happen when people are fully open in the heart space.
So tell me about that, because this is a one of the words that was super triggering to me, the Sylvia Brown on like all these people, like I am livid, and my girlfriend's mom goes to a psychic, and I'm just like, oh my God, so tell me what that means and how you understand that.
So when I say psychic activations, that should be clarified. Thank you. Just more of a trust in the energy that's constantly speaking to you. Mm-hmm. Because they're so open, they're able to tap into kind of their auric field, kind of do a little bit of inventory of what it is in my emotional body, which is governed by everything that's surrounding you that you sometimes can't even see, blind spots. But kind of doing this like emotional inventory, having the heart open, there seems to be a conversation that they can have with their higher selves in that space, and therefore gains more trust of whatever that is. I don't know, that guiding force, call it God, source energy, light. Anytime I try to name it, I immediately get the message, like, don't do that. Yeah. It's not the point. So whatever that is, they gain more trust with that. Mm. And I think that's because the heart is open. And the heart is a beautiful, it's a brain. It has more neurons and electrons than our actual physical brain. So there's a lot happening here when we fully open this space. And then 5-MeO-DMT is a great practice of death.
That's what I felt. I freaked out.
Yeah.
I did not handle it well. Some people just, I've seen Hamilton Pharmacopoeia. He's just love. He's great. I was not that.
He's like, how do I quantify love?
Yeah, how do I quantify love? Yeah. I was a mess. I've done it a handful of times now. And that's what it was. It was everything that I have been and associated myself with being ripped away, and my feeble attempt to remember that I had a dad, that I drove here in a car, the first one was so challenging.
I'm very interested to know, was it with the secretion or with the alkaloid?
I believe it was with secretion.
Okay. Yeah.
I believe it was with toad. And so let's pause here, because you were breaking down the differences here, and then we can go back into that. So with the two different types of 5-MeO. Mm-hmm. Go ahead and share a little bit about that. Oh, well, I definitely want to go back to your experience. Yes. Okay, but putting a pin in it. Yeah, there's this secretion from the Sonoran Desert toad, which is just milking the glands on the side of the toad right onto a glass surface. They scrape it off. That's the medicine. Mm-hmm. The isolated alkaloid, some will refer to it as synthetic. I stay away from calling it that because it's not fake. It's just derived in a laboratory at just making that alkaloid. Okay.
Without anything else.
Great. Yeah. We can come back to that. So we'll put a pin in that. Yeah. But so I took the, I believe, toad of that. And
do you remember your dosage?
Yeah, gosh, let me do this. The first one was like 17 milligrams or whatever.
Okay, 17, that's
17, yeah.
17, that's pretty low.
Yes, it was low.
Okay. Yeah.
And then we actually went lower, and I think I went down to like 13. Mm-hmm. And
but that's 13 plus 17.
Yeah. So, but that was after a break.
Okay.
Or a second time that I came back. And then the suggestion was when I came back a month or two later, because stuff was coming up in my life that was historical, challenging stuff. And it was, we might actually go a bit higher than that, because it seems like at this, you're fighting, like you're really, really fighting. So we went a bit higher, and I was able to, with that, I remember I was just breathe and allow. I was like making noise, like they were just coming.
I totally just I could see exactly.
Yeah,
I know exactly where you were at. Yeah,
in inner bigness, and then I sang for 45 minutes. It was, and it was. I would love to get back there. That was a special place.
That's never. Yeah, that's never not with you.
Yeah,
you can do that anytime.
It was a freedom that I have been working on, and not like I'm definitely making strides, and I'm feeling even as I've not just done more medicine, but more integration, like this tightness in my ribs and my intercostal muscles, like is starting to give way a little bit.
Wow.
But I sang, and I think I actually sang well, which is crazy, but there was a absolute freedom of lows lower than I've ever been, higher than I've ever been. effortlessly in between in my register. And I've always wanted to be a good singer, and I've taken lessons and I focus on the technicalities, but I've never been able to get that smoothness. And when I listen back, it's not a huge argument. It's not great. But I suspect, and I wish I had it recorded, I bet you it was better than I'd ever sang in my life in terms of the timbre and quality and tone.
That was your sacred song. Everybody has a song inside of them.
That's what it felt like. I remember I was like, this is just your song. And I didn't know where it was going. Yeah.
I love this for you.
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like your facilitator was pretty straight on with understanding where you're at, where your next dosage would be. What was the difficult time?
It was a number of things. One of them was acknowledging that I'd been molested, was coming up around the same time, and that came up in a prior ayahuasca ceremony. And that was around a time where I think this happened right before that ayahuasca. I was like, what is in me? I was like, there was this terror, this fear. And if I, years out had to describe why, the terror, I finally had a journey where I went to the same place where I felt lost in the unknown and finally wasn't afraid. But the unknown, the dark, the lostness was one-to-one connected with terror for me. And so I'd had a couple of Aya journeys and those journeys where I was just like, this is a level of being taken out alone into the woods that is just inescapable and horrifying. And, definitely the two most challenging experiences of my life are 5-MeO-DMT that particular day and ayahuasca one particular night.
Yeah.
And I had a similar experience after my dog died, and I felt guided out in the dark, which was, thank God, because I don't want to do that without that level of guidance.
Well, I mean, I think having that experience and then looking, and just that one experience, we'll just use the 5-MeO, not ayahuasca, just the 5-MeO experience. And then looking down later on your timeline, you're an old man, you're transitioning, you have all the family and the friends and the things around you. Would you take something from that experience and bring it over to your death?
It was what the thing that I grabbed onto, and it wasn't connected, but gets me, is that I reached out for my dad. I was so trying to get him, and I was trying to anchor myself with him. And just the love and the importance of that was, having not spoken to him in a couple of weeks or whatever, and just living my life, that in that moment of panic, that was what I went to was, it shows you who you are in those moments of no pretense, no bigging yourself up, no trying to act cool. Like, where do you reach?
Wow.
Yeah.
What a good gauge.
Yeah.
So it was a practice death.
It was definitely a V1. We went through it.
It was a practice. That's why I love 5-MeO.
Yeah.
It is a practice of death, and it really shows you, like you said, where you're hanging on. What is your reactivity? What is the truth behind all the things that you put up? Like, you can't hide from that medicine.
Yeah.
That's the scariest part.
Yes, and that's the thing. Some of the other ones that I've worked with feel more interactive. Like, you can play games, and like it'll give you a lesson because, okay, here's the lesson of what it is to play that game.
Yeah.
And 5-MeO is like no games.
There's no games.
No bullshit.
Nope.
Confrontation with whatever. So it's intense.
Meeting yourself in that space.
Yeah. Do you have a sense, because I was like, man, why am I, there's people that are similar to me in other ways, and they're blissing out and having a great time on these particular things. Do you have a sense when people come into it of how it might? No,
sometimes, but I will say 90% of the time, no. 10% of the time, I can be pretty predictable with what I'm seeing, and I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, I have been shockingly surprised at how people interact with this medicine, and been like, oh, okay, we're going there.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, So this medicine, it's it's a loose cannon in that sense where, you know, you really, if you're facilitating this medicine, have to have a long, strong connection with it and have been in enough ceremonies and circles to where you've kind of seen it all. You're never going to see it all, but you've seen enough to know how to support the different energies that are coming up. People are now coming to medicine for therapeutic reasons. You know, you do have the explorers and the people are like, I just want to see what's in it. I don't even know what my intention is. Let's just go. And that's wonderful. And then you have people who are coming with a lot of trauma and a lot of wounding. And so you never know what's going to come out of that space.
How should these, in your understanding, what sort of supports ought to be there for integration? Because I know that as this stuff gets legalized, well, one we could talk about is that MDMAs and whatever, like phase 3 trials, one of the things that I've heard practitioners that have done it for a while discuss that is exciting but disappointing is that it's very clinical in the way that it's done. So in order to pass through FDA trials, you need to be able to run studies on it that are performed by exactly the same thing, and where the facilitator is not an important piece of it in the sense that they just sit there and, you know, maybe ask questions, but are quiet and sit there. First, thoughts on what might be lost in that application of it?
Well, the rigidity is where things can get lost. The unflexibility to, when you're working with somebody and they're in this open space, to be able to take them outside if they want to go outside. Do you want to color? Do you want, do you want to bang on the drum? Do you want to play the crystal bowls? Like, you know, giving them full range of expression. I see that as not being very clinical. You know, so we'll be missing out on that. And there's a beautiful intuitive relationship that happens with the facilitator who is open to their client. Because as a facilitator, you have to be a full yes with them, right? So like as a doctor, you're like, okay, who do we have today? We've got this person, this person, this person. Let's just go down and get this done. As opposed to a facilitator, if you've come into my circle, I'm just as excited. Like, I'm doing my work to prepare for your work. You know, this is a thing that's being born between us. And so having that facilitator be in that space, I think it makes a difference. And then the integration piece really can't happen until you really see. So like going back to the rigidity, there isn't a format of integration. You don't know what the integration is until you sit with the medicine. Yeah. So as a facilitator, you're kind of like party planning a little bit, like, and putting notes in your head of like, okay, this is going to be a great thing for them after integration, this thing. So you're getting all these like tools and techniques, and they're not necessarily going to be in any textbooks, these techniques that come up. So having that kind of willingness to work with the spirit of the medicine, I think can get lost in the medical system. The medical system has a place for this. It's getting us through a really small door of opportunity to open this medicine up to, you know, other people. And some people really, there are a certain class of people that could never imagine sitting with medicine with someone like me. I want to be in a setting. I want to be in the hospital. I want to be close to machines. And that's what it's going to take for them to feel comfortable. And so I recognize the importance of that too. So, you know, it's just going to be a navigating process through legalization. I don't foresee, I guess I'll always probably be rogue with my qualifications.
I think, and you know, that's where the volatility of the medical system comes in and says we want to cap downside, but in order to do that, we have to standardize, which sort of caps our upside as well.
Right. And what I mean, me being who I am, I'm connected to a lot of practitioners who've gone through the education, who've gone through the system, who've invested a lot of their energy into making this possible for this medicine to go through them. And then I work with them and their clients. There's my door in, you know, to now have the full medical setting, the full, you know, thing that they're looking for. And then the esoteric, energetic, intuitive door open too. So there can be a world where both systems can collaborate.
Yeah. I'm excited. I hope that, I think that in my future, if it is legalized to an extent where I would feel comfortable, like I would love to have a facility of some kind.
Yes.
That, you know, I don't know that I see myself necessarily, though possibly as a facilitator, but Right now I'm learning.
You're learning. Yeah. Be with the medicine, and the medicine will show up like, you'll know what, okay, I want to serve this. I want to create, I have such a deep relationship with this medicine that I want to learn more. I want to get in community. I want to find a mentor. I want to be in circles, and I want to like, it's a deep feeling of creation that comes through you. And wanting to be of service. And so when that feels like that's turned up all the way, then you'll know.
Yeah. I know the answer to this question, but I want to hear you talk about it. Well, I guess I don't know exactly. How does your work make you feel? Like both the dueling and the serving? Yeah,
I feel like I'm living my dharma. I feel very fortunate to have figured out and landed in a space of receptivity to hold this. It makes me feel like, going back to that word, I feel satisfied every day in this work, whether it's a full packed crazy day, or maybe I'm just kind of serving a couple people or taking a couple calls. Like, all of it is impactful. So I feel my work makes me and reflects back to me my satisfaction. Yeah, I guess that's the word.
Yeah.
I feel satisfied.
I want to find that. No, I've enjoyed my work. I've been inspired, engaged, titillated, like heady things with work in the past, but that deep satisfaction of like, oh, right place, this is it. I sense is beyond things that I've yet to find that. So
I think you found it. I think when you close your eyes, you do have a vision of what that person looks like, talks like, where he lives, where he spends his time. Like, I think you have a pretty clear idea of where that is, but you're just doing the work to get there.
Yes, it's revealing itself, and also I'm getting comfortable with the ways in which that inner knowing I have a resistance to. I don't really like it. I like things that are stacked and deductible. You go this plus this plus this plus this equals this. Yeah. When things come in complete packages unbidden, I almost go, whoa. That's too easy. Not even too easy. That's, I got to work through some stuff that just, I feel resistance to.
Yeah, you'll get there. And this is the whole point, is to be in the process of it. Once you get there, then you're going to be like thinking about the next thing. Mm-hmm. So
we'll do that. There was
this is the unfolding. One
final piece, which we mentioned earlier, but I just wanted to say, because I hadn't known this, and I think it might be useful if people are doing this, is that you work with, not synthetic, but you work with, what is the term they use?
I call it an isolated alkaloid, or 5-MeO-DMT. So bufo is referring to the toad, the bufo alvarius toad. And then 5-MeO, you can call it 5, or the isolated alkaloid, or the synthetic, but
So what are some of the reasons that you've decided to go that route?
One of the main reasons was the energy. There's a lot of different technical things with the bufo alvarius that just didn't feel in alignment it's like once you discover spots on something, you can't unsee them. Mm-hmm. So there's just a lot in the collection of the medicine. There are some really ethical places on this planet that ethically source it, but for me, it just made more sense as well to move over to the isolated alkaloid, because I also serve people who are dying. And in the secretion, there's only 15. The
secretion comes from the toad.
The secretion that comes from the toad, there's about 15 to 29% of the 5-MeO, and the rest are all toxins that you don't even know what you're smoking.
Okay.
Because those toxins are generated specifically to that toad's environment and its specific predators.
So is this secretion like keep predators off? Is that what it does in the wild? Okay.
And then people will come toad them and then over milk them, and now they have nothing to protect themselves.
Okay.
So there's a lot of reasons, but that was like the main, there's a lot of different, like I said, reasons, but the main one was like, I have to make sure what I'm serving people who are transitioning, I have to make sure I know exactly what I'm giving them and the exact amount. So for dosage reasons, this is as target and specific as I could get.
Wow. So you'll do, I didn't realize you're doing 5-MeO during transition at times. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Smaller doses, large?
Yeah, small doses. Okay. I work with people who are in transitioning, there's a lot of things that are different than serving somebody who's physically healthy.
Of course, yeah.
A lot of considerations. But one of the considerations is I take it very low and slow. We're doing very small dosages, so 5 milligrams, waiting, another 5 milligrams, waiting, another 5 milligrams. So it's a slow, drawn out process, low and slow. And my process with that is I'm not trying to blow somebody's mind away. There's a fine line between surrender and submit. And I'm not trying to show somebody how to submit to the medicine. I want to show them how to surrender. And that goes with some kind of awareness with them in that medicine. And I knew there was this one client that I worked with, and he had never done a psychedelic in his life. He was dying of stage 4 liver cancer. So he had done every treatment, every morphine, every painkiller, anything that could help him at the end of life. He's tried it, trials, everything. And I gave him the first inhalation of the 5, and he lays back in his seat and he just goes, "Oh, this is better than morphine." But you know, even in that like funniness, I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like for somebody who's dying of that kind of cancer to say it's better than morphine, that spoke to me. I was like, this is important work. This is important work, you know. And this other woman was beautiful. Her intention of trying this medicine was she was afraid that dying would hurt. Separating from her body would be painful. And in the medicine, so like I said, I give the 5, we wait, 5, we wait. In between those little waves, she was saying, "Oh man, I'm separated. There's a separateness. Oh, separated." And she would do like little somatic shakes, and she just kept repeating this. And in between the next round, I said, "Hey, can you tell me a little bit about what you were talking about, where you were when you said separate?" And she's like, "Yeah, I was separate, completely separate from my body." And I said, "Well, did it hurt?" And her eyes lit up and she goes, "No."
Yeah.
And right there, the deal was made that it didn't have to hurt. Something about her death changed in that moment because now she had enough proof that separating didn't have to be associated with pain and suffering.
Wow.
So like these things are happening and revealing themselves at the end of life that I can't ignore it.
Yeah, they're just like rehearsals right at the end, right before
the final gift.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That is the questions that I had. Is there anything that we touched on that you wanted to go back to?
Oh gosh, no, I feel really complete.
Perfect.
I mean, satisfied. I was just really grateful to be here and to have been invited into this space. And you and your team have just been really welcoming and loving, and this has just felt really natural. So thank you.
Thank you for coming. Where can people find you? You said you have a podcast if they want to learn more. And I know you also have a Death Doula, I think, course that teaches people to do that.
I have a lot of things happening. So I've the Anamkara Academy, which is a 3-month certification process where I teach people to hold this space. And it's a mystery school. It's a really powerful initiation into this work. And then I have my podcast called the Anamkara Podcast, ANAM Kara, CARA podcast. But yeah, if you want to find me, it's Mary Telliano on Instagram or connectanamkara.com.
Cool. We'll throw in links.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mary.
Yeah.
Wonderful chatting.
Yeah.